Good morning. Welcome to Ask the Expert, Episode 2, Nitro Systems. My name is Highland Joseph, and I'll be your moderator. Today, we're meeting with Rich Leeson from BUNN. We will discuss some basics of Nitro Systems. We'll do a short seminar explaining the equipment, and then allow up to 20 minutes for questions and answers. We will also provide listeners with contact info if you have further questions or comments. The Ask the Expert series is for everybody. Our first season of 7 episodes will be webinars on equipment, basic theory, service operations, and career advancement. Next week's episode is how to make their career change from barista to tech. We are committed to presenting these episodes throughout the year, so save Fridays at 8 a.m. for the Coffee Tech Guild. With that, I'd like to introduce Rich Leeson from BUNN. Rich, before we start the presentation, why don't you tell us about yourself and your history in coffee?
Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Rich Leeson. I am a zone technical manager for BUNN. I've been at BUNN for almost 35 years now. Started off in the factory, worked my way through as a service manager into sales, and then now as a kind of a hybrid between the sales department and the service department. So really my background is customer service, support, and for both the customer and the equipment manufacturer. So that's my history. I've been around for a little bit.
I know it's I think combined we have about 100 years of coffee history together. So we've got about 100 attendees. We chat questions will come through chat. So as we're talking, if you have questions, let us know. Rich, I'm going to let you get started and get myself out of here. And if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks, you guys.
Okay. Let's go. So we've got a brief history and a background on the Nitro systems. My first slide, we're talking about the difference between Nitro coffee and cold brew. There seems to be a little confusion in the world of what's what. A cold brew is a process of extraction using cold water over a long period of time, resulting in a fantastically smooth, nice coffee beverage. Typically what we're doing is we're taking that cold brew and then nitrogenating it by introducing nitrogen gas, resulting in a beverage that's much like a Guinness beer or something like that you might be familiar with that's been nitrogenated. Another gas that's commonly used in the beverage industry, but not with coffee, is CO2, which results in bubbles and the carbonation. So this is similar to that, but with a different gas, nitrogen gas. So what we also find in the field is that there are different types of base products. There are basically liquid coffees that can be nitrogenated. You can nitrogenate tea. You can nitrogenate a lot of different beverages, and they're really kind of fun to experiment. But in this regard, we're talking about nitro coffee. So understanding the difference between cold brew and nitro coffee. So cold brew is a product on its own, can be used with or without the nitrogen, and enjoyed with or without that nitrogen. There's 2 major types of systems that are out there, and with a very large option of manufacturers. But the 2 systems are keg systems and then tabletop dispensers. BUNN's engaged with the tabletop dispenser systems, but we're going to talk about keg systems right now. So a keg system is not any different than a beer or other type beverage dispenser. We use the nitrogen gas as a propellant. It's pushing the coffee out of the keg to the tap handle. This is usually done on lower pressure, somewhere in around about the 35 psi range to be able to push that out. There are different keg systems where they use the same nitrogen to be able to push the coffee out and still be a cold brew dispense, non-nitrogenated. And then there's also ones where they put a little bit more nitrogen in there, so it ends up as a nitrogen infused beverage in the cup. So there's the system and you can see in the picture that we've supplied here, the system pretty basic. It's a standard tank, regulator, lines, keg, and then tap handles. That's the fundamental parts of this type of system. Now this all goes into a cabinet. The cabinet is refrigerated to be able to keep that coffee base cold. The colder the coffee base is, the better it works with the nitrogen and dispenses to the cup. The BIP system or dispense system, more to what BUNN uses, is, I hate to say it, but it's a modified juice machine, if you will. It's an ice bank system, and it takes the concentrate, and in this case, we do use a concentrate because we are mixing with cold water from the ice bank. And that cold water is nitrogenated or nitrogen charged as it's mixing with the concentrate. And then as you pull the handle, these products come out into the cup, and it's a beautiful drink. And again, we can do both a cold brew or what we call a flat drink, and or a nitrogenated drink. The different ways of getting the nitrogen to this type of machine and or the keg machines are there's nitro generators, there's the gas tanks, or a nitrogen gas module, which you can see in the picture is a little black box next to the machine. And we'll explain more about that. Key component here, whenever we're talking about coffee and good quality beverages, is the water base, the water that we start with. Water filtration is a must, and is certainly part of the large scheme of things on being able to provide a quality drink. Safety. Safety is a really important piece on this, especially from the technical side. As we go through these bullet points, I will highlight these, because they are important. Safety is always important. Nitrogen tanks are filled under high pressure. Usually a full tank is about 2,000 PSI. So we have to handle these properly and cautiously. The nitrogen tanks should always be secured so they can't tip or fall. We really don't want to move these around. That's somebody else's work. The tank distribution people should be the ones that are handling these tanks. We don't want them bumped into, crashed into, ran over, dropped, all those kind of fun things. Nitrogen tanks should always be stored in a well-ventilated area. I will bring this up again, but I'll say it now, is that nitrogen dissipates the oxygen around us. So we don't like to have leaks, and we don't like to be in confined areas with these nitrogen tanks. The next bullet point is use nylon fisheye gaskets. This is kind of one of the biggest things I've seen in the field, is that I get a call where somebody's nitrogen tank that they just put in is now empty. How come this machine uses so much gas? Well, that's probably because the fittings were not sealed using these small nylon fisheye gaskets on the gas lines from the regulators to the machines. The gas is, again, under high pressure. It is a inert gas. We sometimes can hear it. We won't smell it. We don't know it's leaking until that tank is empty and we have flat drinks. So use the gaskets. I prefer using the gaskets as a one-time use. So if I disconnected these lines, moved them around for any reason, then I put new fisheye gaskets on them. And they're available in from Amazon to any manufacturer, very common in the industry. You must know when you're working on this equipment what the manufacturer's operating pressure specifications are, and we don't want to exceed that. The regulators that are attached to the tank control the pressure going to, whether it's a keg machine or a BIB machine, and it controls the pressure. Every manufacturer has a specific specification for that pressure, and you should know that. It should be labeled on the machine somewhere as well. If you get it too high, you will blow lines, and it's not good, or you will be blowing product out the valve, and that's not a fun thing to clean up. If you are concerned about a leak in the nitrogen gas system, the simple soap and water in a spray bottle on the fittings and connections is a great way to find bubbles and identify leaks. So it's kind of nice to have a spray bottle and a little Dawn soap in your service vehicle and use it when you need it. Nitrogen gas is not flammable, but here's that other part about it, dispersing oxygen. Nitrogen gas is used as a fire extinguisher because as soon as you squirt it on there, it takes the oxygen away and a fire can't burn. So in racing and different other aspects, tires, nitrogen gas is used, very common. We're breathing nitrogen gas at about a 78% level all the time. So it's always around us. But if it's in high concentrate, it does disperse oxygen and is not flammable. There we go. Tankless systems. So tankless systems like nitron generators, they create oxygen from the air around us. These generators are quite large typically, and they could be expensive. However, they eliminate the need for replenishing tanks, replacing tanks, moving tanks, storing tanks. The tanks and generators provide a purity level between 98 and 99.5% pure nitrogen. So if you're in concern of a pure nitrogen gas for whatever component or system you're trying to use, that's where you're going to get the cleanest, more purest nitrogen is through a tank or a nitrogen generator. BUNN has created and produces a nitron gas module, which takes the air around us and filters out or wipes out the other components in the air, leaving only nitrogen, which at a 78% level. And then we can put that into the drink. This reduces the tanks, the regulators, the generators, and all of that. However, this gas module has filters in it that do require an annual service. They work very well. They're small, they're compact, but there is a purity level difference between a tank and a generator and these gas module systems. So just to be aware of that. That is the end of my slides. So I went through those a little fast. So Highland, we can open up questions and answers at this point.
Yeah, that was great. That actually covered a lot of interesting stuff. There was a question that I was thinking in my mind as you were talking is, on the barista end in these numerous machines, what's the day-to-day cleaning? What are the day-to-day cleaning?
Great question. Starting with the keg systems, the lines, because you're mixing the nitrogen with the coffee all the time, the lines need to be purged and cleaned out. Always the nozzles, the tap handles, the tap systems all need to be rinsed and cleaned. So it's somewhat of an automated system by hooking up a cleaning solution and pulling it through the system to flush it out. So that's a day-to-day. Same thing with the BIBs. They need to be rinsed. They need to be flushed out. You know, cleaning is important.
So as you're training your techs, most of us are trained not on juice systems. What additional training would you recommend? What do you want to add to a tech's wheelhouse for them to understand how to work on these systems?
Well, there's some interesting parts in all of these systems. The gas regulators are common to any system. So understanding that you have tank pressure information on that regulator, and you also have your outbound. So being able to know what you're reading on that regulator is important. Not complex, but you need to be aware of that. Use fisheye gaskets in the beverage industry, for coffee, standard coffee service. We don't typically use those nylon fisheyes. So having those when you start working on these types of systems is important. When we get internal to these machines, like the BIB system that BUNN has, there's peristaltic pumps that are moving the concentrate. Having another set of tools, a scale, which is probably pretty common, but scales and measuring devices, and also TDS meters or refractometers come into play as being able to read, because we're determining as service people if we have a machine problem or if we have a mix ratio problem. And it's hard to taste that, or it's hard to know that. And so sometimes these measuring devices can really answer those questions.
Okay. So are there different ways to diffuse the pour that enable that big, beautiful cascade? Is there a specific science behind that? Now you get that Guinness looking. I've always been impressed with the different systems where it's like, it looks like a Guinness beer. Sometimes it doesn't taste like a Guinness. You get that foam, that beautiful cup. What kind of system, how does the cascade function work?
Well, you're introducing the nitrogen gas into the coffee beverage. That cascading is the release of the nitrogen gas back to the atmosphere as it comes up and cascades out of that cup, just like we would see CO2 bubbles coming out of a soda or something like that. Now, what I find interesting is that there's a lot of unknown. This is a new beverage category that hasn't been refined. For example, SCA, not I'll drop off the other A because I'm old, is that they have very specific coffee parameters on how coffee is brewed, the gold cup standards and so on. In the nitro world, it's new. So learning how much nitrogen to put in that cup is kind of a personal opinion, by that coffee developer, the cold brew or coffee developer. So there's not a standard. So everybody's got a personal taste to it. And it's a neat thing to be able to have a personal taste and a personal opinion on something, but we have to understand what the adjustments are. The more nitrogen gas infused into the drink, the more it's going to, put a head on that drink and have more cascading. Cascading also comes from the proper glass or vessel too, so we can't see that in a cardboard cup. So that kind of takes away from the theater of it.
Okay, we have some questions. Let me get this opened up here so I can get them for you. Is there a single nitrogen unit for home? Is there a single nitrogen unit for home use right now?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, let me get this.
I live in the commercial world, so I really, there might be something out there. I just don't know.
If a keg if a keg of non-hydrogenated, not non-nitrogenated cold brew is hooked up to a tap faucet, and keg cabinet assembly. What needs to be done to be able to serve still cold brew on one tap and nitro cold brew on the other tap? Is it the faucet type, a regulator pressure difference on each line? I'm reading these questions as they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's on a keg system, you would need ideally 2 tap handles or 2 tappers. What they'll do is they'll take the one gas tank and they'll put a T fitting, 2 different kegs, and they'll split it, and they'll put different pressure into the cold brew flat drink and label that. But the systems are designed for that. The kegerators that are out there, or the keg dispense units, are designed for a flat and on one side and a nitro on the other. I don't know if that answers that, but you know, there's some manipulation to it on internal to that.
How about talking about secondary regulators?
You can do that. You can put 2 tanks, two regulators in there, and split them out, if that's what the question is.
Okay, let me. I'm having a little difficulty with the question section here. I mean, the age of the cold brew affects the pour in the cascade. Is there a set standard for use time, as in a week, month, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a coffee, you know, roaster, you know, brewer, you know, question really. I would say that the kegs, when you introduce the nitrogen and you put it in the refrigerator, there is always going to be a life expectancy in there once it's been opened up. It's probably longer than what we really expect, but we also, just like anything else, there's a freshness piece. You know, I travel, so I drink coffee that's been sitting on a burner all day, and you know, but I really do enjoy a fresh brewed cup of coffee. So same thing's going to happen with the nitrogen. The fresher it is, and being maintained at the right temperature is going to hold that longer than not. And I guess it depends on the shipping and storage of it as well before it even made it to the keg.
If you plan to serve kombucha and nitro cold brew, is it easy enough to hook up both to the same tank but using different head?
I don't know. Kombucha's a bit different, and I've seen the systems at trade shows and so on. I believe that the pressure is different on the kombucha to be able to move that out than it is on the coffee beverage. So that system's a little bit different. And I think the nozzle on the tap is slightly different for the kombucha than it is for the coffee.
Is the N2 gen that BUNN is using, isn't that just an air compressor introducing oxygen to the beverage?
No. Yes and no. Trick question. It is basically an air compressor, but it is compressing air for pressure. But it's basically wiping or washing out the oxygen levels and other things out of that air, leaving just the nitrogen going into the machine at about a 78% rate.
This is an interesting question that's not really specific to us, but what about the nitro coffee in a can? What is the problem with that? I know I have flavor issues with it, but it's an interesting question. What do you think about the nitro coffee in the can?
I think it serves its purpose. I think it, you know, I'm going to revert back to my beer. You know, I would rather, in use an example of a Guinness, I would rather have a nice Guinness poured out of a tap in a draft, opposed to you know, the can ones or the Boddingtons or the other ones that have the nitro infusion systems. I think coffee's the same way. You know, it's whether you like soda in a bottle or a can. It's a preference. So it serves its purpose. It's nice to be able to go to the store and grab one and go.
Next question, what is the most common TDS for a concentrate from your experience versus the most common TDS of a ready-to-drink product out of the tap?
When I'm doing TDS measures on cold brew and nitro coffees, I'm seeing somewhere between, and again, it's customer specific, from 1 to say 2.5, 2.5. I'm sorry, I'm saying on a refractometer. TDS would be a bit higher than that. It's a different set of numbers than what we're seeing in standard coffees. So they're usually, I'm measuring on a refracted number, which is somewhere about the.
So interesting question from Marty Rowe, actually.
Marty.
Are there certain coffees that lend themselves better to nitro? Actually, that's a question I would ask too.
Yeah, I think that the true cold brew method of extracting the coffee just is a better finished product. However, in the commercial food service world, there are other bulk products that are out there that turn out pretty darn good. But any of the cold brew extracted bases seem to be much more enjoyable.
Can you talk a little bit about carb stones? Did you hear that?
Carb stone.
Carb, C-A-R-B.
No, I don't know what that is. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. Does the BUNN gas module actually concentrate nitrogen to higher than ambient air levels? It was my understanding that the filters are simply to dry the air.
Yeah, it doesn't increase the nitrogen. We're always in an atmosphere with 78% nitrogen, the way I understand it. So what we're doing is we're just wiping out the other stuff, the oxygen, the CO2 that we're breathing that is around us. So we're taking that out. There is a moisture, there is a cleaning, the water part of it, all of that is being taken out in the filter system.
Okay. You're getting a lot of requests for the PDF, sort of the PowerPoint. Are you willing to share that?
Sure.
Okay. Do you need a license or some type of certification to handle such nitro systems?
That's an excellent question. There is, I did some studies on this early on for us as a company. The DOT is who controls the movement of tanks. Just like this is kind of a weird place to go on this, is that, for example, if you've got a gardener that's got a lawnmower, in the back of his truck, and he's got a gas can because he needs it to fill up the lawnmower, that's a material of trade, is that gasoline. So he is okay transporting that gasoline in there. We can also use that same concept on moving a tank from, installation to installation. But if you're driving around with bulk tanks in your vehicle, you probably do need a license, and it depends on the municipality and the rules and regs in your area. To be able to move that tank, connect it, change it, no, you don't. To add a regulator, empty tank to a full tank, converting over, you don't need a certification. Not in the sense that, like in refrigeration, if you open a refrigeration system, you must. But in this case, you don't.
Okay. Yeah. Excuse me. Do nitrogen systems need adjustment during operation in the way espresso and machine grinders need adjustments? Or Do they maintain consistent extraction after service?
Ask me that one more time, please.
Sorry, I kind of lost my voice there for a second. Sorry about that. Do nitrogen systems need adjustment during operation? In the same way, espresso machines and grinders need adjustments to maintain extraction quality, or do they maintain consistent extraction after service?
Honestly, the ones that I have worked with, both keg systems and BIB, hold their consistency throughout. The change would be is at the end of the nitrogen tank, as that is running out, then you may start seeing some differences in the cascading because you're just out of nitrogen gas. But as far as the delivery goes and the ratios and all that, they hold very true.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. Is there a nitrogen shortage going on?
Not that I'm aware of,
Okay.
but I don't know. Great question, but I don't know.
I know. Let me scroll through. There's a lot. So, are there devices on the market from more than one manufacturer that facilitate the inline nitrogenation that will allow you to use a single keg of cold brew, dispense both flat and nitrogenated cold brew?
I believe there is, but it really is manufacturer specific to the components that's in that delivery system. For the BUNN unit, we're very specific from one side to the other because we can pump that concentrate out with and mix it with water, or pump it out, mix it with water, and add nitrogen. When you get into a keg system, the componentry is different because you have to split that line and be able to get it and be able to make it determine which one you want. So the components are specific to that manufacturing keg system, and they would have to be able to tell you if you can do that. It's a little far out there. It's probably becomes more complicated to do it that way.
Okay, let's do 3 more questions. Do the tanks have a meter to let you know when you are low and need to switch the tanks?
Yes, sir. The regulator is that meter. So it's a double gauge. Typically, we're using double gauge regulators. The one is the tank pressure or the volume of nitrogen gas that's in the tank. And then the second gauge on that regulator is your outbound set. And that is what you're sending to the dispensing unit. So yes, the regulator is that component that does that.
Okay. Here's an interesting question that kind of goes to tech standards. How do you find a supplier that can, sorry about that. How do you find a supplier that can install a system for you in your cafe that knows what they're doing? Welcome to the Coffee Technicians Guild. I know.
From our perspective at BUNN, our techs in the third-party service agents that we use, they should be aware of how to handle that equipment just like anything else we manufacture. I'm sure every manufacturer of every type of system has a list of techs that in a geographical area that should know that. If you really wanted to, and you're out in that remote area trying to figure this out, I would probably communicate with the soda companies. There's always a soda bottler that's in that area that probably would know who's tuned into that and be able to figure out a solution to that. I can't imagine that there's any manufacturer out there that wouldn't have an open conversation with any type of technician that wanted to learn. I mean, we're certainly open to that. I'm sure everybody else is too. So if you're interested in learning more about it, we're able to do training and get you up to speed.
Interesting question is, someone asked about the different ways to infuse the gas in the liquid. Pressure versus agitation. Is there a better way to infuse the gas in the liquid? I don't actually understand the question, honestly. Do you understand the
Well,
question?
I think if I understand the question correctly, and I might be wrong, and correct me if I'm not answering it the right way. There, like in the BIB systems, we are nitrogenating the water as it flows into the concentrate mix, and we're getting the nitrogen saturation at that point in that water, and then it goes to the cup. A keg system, you're nitrogenating that whole vessel of coffee concentrate. So your saturation is different at that point because you're shooting the nitrogen into the keg and then also pushing all of that out to the tap handle. So the saturation is different in between the systems. It's a preferred situation as well, though, on what you're looking for. We're finding, or I'm finding, that depending regionally, what the customer specific expectations of saturation are. You know, you go to the Pacific Northwest, and they want something different than Texas. You know, so as far as what that cascading, what that saturation, what that look and feel is, and what the taste, you know, bottom line is, it's preferred taste.
Okay. There was a question about pressure here. What is the optimal pressure for a good nitro system?
They're different. A BUNN system, we're supplying about 120, 125 psi to that machine, from a generator, a tank, or a module. A keg system is usually running somewhere between 30 and 40.
Okay. Last question is, someone has asked you to explain what a nitro stout insert is.
I'm going to take a swipe at this because I don't know the, you know, for sure if I understand it, but in the spigot or the tap itself, there's typically a diffuser in there that helps aerate and yeah, just aerate the beverage as it's going through the tap when it's a nitro system. If it's a flat, you know, cold brew, that insert, that stem insert is not there, and you know, you're just getting the cold brew flat, you know, nice coffee coming out of there. If that's the answer, I'm not sure if that fits the question or not, but I think that's what they're talking about.
I'm getting a lot of unusual questions. Let's see if there's anything else, you guys.
No such thing as unusual. It's just I just don't know the answer.
But now I got a copy of the manual yesterday, so now I want to read the manual and know the tech on this. From Terry Olson. Wait, that he's answering a question. Can you actually infuse as low as 8 psi if you have a system that does inline nitrogenation? Some people are answering questions here, so I'm kind of trying to get through the questions and the answers.
I've not seen anything set up that low, but again, there's a lot of experimentation going on with this infusion component, with people trying in developing their own way. So I've not seen anything that low. But that doesn't mean it's not out there and somebody hasn't, you know, developed it and said, heck yeah, that's rocking that way. So,
well, that's an interesting point though. You're talking about creative uses of infusion. Have you seen anything interesting out there?
You know, this all started off with nitro coffee, and then I have seen people put all kinds of fun stuff in through these machines. You know, teas. And teas react differently because of the you know, different components of the tea itself, the tannins and stuff in the tea. I've seen somebody doing nitrogenated root beer.
Wow.
Amazing. It's like a root beer float, with no ice cream in it. It's it's just fun stuff to try, putting through these machines. There's some creativity with their cold brew. The cold brew starts off as a concentrate, and then they start thinning that down and changing the ratios to that. The blends of coffees. There's just a lot of fun experimentation going on with it. It's neat. It's a neat product right now. So
I am surprised to hear that. I never would have thought. I mean, looking at it, it's like I see a juice machine, even with the knife.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's interesting to see. It speaks to how creative specialty coffee people are. It's interesting to see the innovation being able to take that further. We are out of questions. Actually, we've had a lot of really good questions. I'm going to wrap it up. If anybody wants a copy of Rich's presentation, email me at highlandjoseph@protonmail.com. I put it in the chat line. Rich, do you have anything you want to say before we close this up?
Yeah, just be safe with these tanks and these systems. Don't be afraid of them, but venture in like you would with electricity or anything else. Just be cautiously, safe with them. Find out what the specs are for that manufacturer's equipment, and as far as pressures go, so you can maintain that safety level. But don't be afraid of them, and reach out to whoever it is, a manufacturer or someone like me, or every manufacturer has somebody like me, and we're glad to help you understand this equipment in more depth, and just enjoy this fun new beverage.
Thanks. That wraps this episode. Next week's episode is going to be going from barista to tech. We'll have a panel that will discuss the steps that you take to migrate from a career as a barista or a store manager over to being a technician or a service manager. And that will be Friday at 8. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to me via my email or reach out to the membership email for the guild. Everyone, thanks for coming and have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Vincent, you can shut it down.